When we say the word wealth, we're not just talking about money, we're also talking about time, and we're talking about the influence in the lives of the people you care about the most. Wealthy people, those who have a lot of money, time, and influence, didn't get there by taking the same path as everyone else. They thought differently. They made bold, unusual moves, and that's why they've accomplished what so few people accomplish. The goal of this podcast is to train you in the mindsets and the specific tactics of the wealthy so that you're fit and capable of producing wealth yourself. We want to help you get wealth fit. Let's go. Wealth Fit Nation, welcome back. We are live in the studio. We're going to flip the script today, and I want to talk about something incredibly important because we talk a lot about wealth creation, we talk a lot about mindset, but listen, if we don't have our health in order, then it's all for naught, right? You could have all the money in the world, you could have all the wealth in the world, but if you're not functioning, if you're dragging, if you're not excited every day and functioning at the highest levels, then man, it's just, what are you doing? And so we are here today with an icon. We are here with JJ Virgin. I am super excited, JJ, to have you here today on the show.
Thank you.
Not only for them, but for me personally. I got self-interest
All right,
here.
let's get you some health advice. You look like you're doing really well,
Well,
though.
thank you. I got a little sweet tooth, which we'll talk about.
All right.
Is that a toughie?
My husband has a sweet tooth.
Okay.
So
you can have one. I guess maybe we're jumping right into it. So you
should
can
we
have.
go there now?
I don't know. Actually, we'll
right.
save it. We'll save it. We'll let it simmer a little bit. I wanna go back. It's 2012. Your career's humming along. You've been on TV, best-selling books. You're doing seminars. You're speaking all over the world. And one day you get the call that no parent wants to get. You get the call about your son.
I was like, I didn't even get the call.
How did it go down?
I got the, so what actually happened was I was home, my kids were 15 and 16 years old. I'd been taping all day long because I was getting ready for the Virgin Diet to come out.
Okay.
Which was my first really breakthrough book. And everyone talks about your overnight success. That was 25 years in the making. And that was this book. And I'd gotten what I considered at the time to be a huge advance. I'd gotten $500,000. I invested all of it. And so I'm the primary financial support for my kids. And divorced, I've invested all this money into this book and borrowed, because I'm going to make this thing go big. It's
Right.
going to go on public television, all this stuff, super cool. It's a couple weeks from the launch, and that is the craziest time as an author. And I come home and my son, my 16-year-old son, was in a snit.
A snit?
A snit.
What's a snit?
A snit is stomping around. He wanted to go to
okay.
martial arts, but his dad had said no. Now, I wasn't going to throw dad under the bus. We worked together, so I could, you'll go tomorrow. You can't do it, because he'd left school because he had a headache that magically disappeared,
Right.
they always do with kids. So I said no, and he got all upset with me and stomped out. And the next thing I know, my ex-husband and my other son, Bryce, come running in the door. And I was in the garage working out. And they said, Grant's been hit by a car and airlifted to the local hospital. Now, you don't get airlifted when you break your leg.
Yeah.
So, and he was a John Doe at the time. The only reason we knew this was they happened upon the accident scene, which was literally 3 blocks from our house. And they saw this huge accident scene, and one of the policemen came out and said, a boy got hit. And his dad asked about it, and he said, well, he looks just like him, because my sons are 1 year apart, right?
Okay.
They're Irish twins. So we know that it's Grant. They won't tell us anything at the hospital because there was no ID on him. We get there, the doctors are solemn. They put us into a conference room. They're not saying a word. So now it's really bad.
Yeah.
And they come in, they said, your son's been hit by a car. He's in a coma. He has multiple brain bleeds, and he has a torn aorta. Now, a torn aorta is what killed Princess Diana and kills 90% of the people right in the scene. And they said, he has a torn aorta, it has to be repaired. If not, it's going to rupture sometime in the next 24 hours. It's hanging on by an onion skin. But we can't repair it here because we can't do the right surgery. We'd have to do it with a blood thinner. His brain would bleed out. He goes, and he's not going to survive an airlift. So the next hospital, which was in LA, he will never survive that airlift. And even if he were to survive that airlift, he's not going to survive that surgery. And even if he were going to survive that surgery, I kid you not, this is what this doctor's saying. I'm like, looking at this doctor, my other son's looking at the doctor, he goes, he'd be so brain damaged it wouldn't be worth it. And my other son looks at him and goes, well, is there like maybe a 0.25% chance he'd make it? And the doctor says, yes, that's about right, son. He goes, well, we'll take those odds. It's like, it's not zero,
wow.
right? And I looked at him,
wow.
and this is where my ex-husband's a med mal trial attorney.
Okay.
And, you know, I'm just a warrior mom, and I looked and I'm like,
Yep.
we're overruling you. Like, why are you standing around? Doesn't time matter here? And the guy got very huffy. It was all in the medical notes. I told them not to do this. I'm like, well, what's the risk is he dies here.
Yep.
The risk is he dies on the plane. Like, I'd rather know that we died trying.
Yeah,
like, let's go for this.
Yeah.
And so they put him on a helicopter, flew him there. We drove in the middle of the night, not knowing what we were going to see. We said goodbye to him. He was literally on a gurney. And I'm like, I will never, ever forget this, but it was like I was watching a movie. I think that's what your brain does so that you go, this is not real, right? Because I walk in and he literally has road rash with glass sticking out. He's got a ventilator, he's got a tube coming out of his head, he's got a central line, he's got bones sticking through his skin because he has 13 fractures.
Goodness.
I mean, it's like, and Bryce, my 15-year-old, walks up and goes, dude, right? You look really ugly. I'm watching this going, who is this boy? He goes, but you totally got this. If anyone can do this, you can do this.
Oh, that's cool.
And I'm like, this kid is amazing.
Yeah.
So we get up there, we walk in to Harbor UCLA. This doctor walks up and he goes, I got this. You don't even need to worry about this. I do this all the time. I had a guy thrown off the overpass last week. I totally fixed him.
Wow.
He goes, I can fix this. And he goes, and what I found out later was he got the call on this. He got 5 other teams involved. He had the neurosurgical team, he had the orthopedic team, he had the critical care team, he had the pediatric critical care team, and he was the cardiothoracic surgeon. And he got a hold of a stent that's not supposed to be put in kids and was no longer available. It was part of a study, but that's the one he wanted. And this happened between 2 a.m. and 5 a.m.
Wow.
And we walk in, he goes, I got this. I'm like, Carlos Donaire, Dr. Carlos Donaire, yeah. And it was like game on when you walked in there.
Yeah.
And so he goes, I'm going to show you where you're going to hang out and wait. I'll show you the operating room, then we'll go over here. He was just trying to get me out of there, right? And I'll come back in 3 hours and I'll tell you he's fine.
Wow.
And I literally went up there and I wrote blog posts.
Really?
I did, because I was like, what am I going to, you know, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And so, and I was on I forget what show it was on that I was on, and I had stuff due, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to go up there. I think it was the Discovery Network thing. I'm going to write these things and hang out. And he comes up and he's like, all right,
man,
it's all good. He goes, now I don't know if he'll ever wake up. I'm just the plumber. So he was good, but then he was in a coma for weeks, and then he was in the hospital for months, and then literally it was 5 years of him coming out of a traumatic brain injury. This is no easy thing.
Wow.
And all they told me at the time was, it'll be a little ugly. I'm like, you didn't tell me it'd be 5 years of ugly.
Yeah.
Where we did a lot of different things. And hey, I will tell you that, talk about being motivated to make something a success. I looked at him in that coma and I said, Grant, I just need you to fight. Like, your name means warrior.
Yeah.
I need you to fight. I go, because I'm going to go get every single resource, and you're going to be better than before the accident. You're going to be 110%. And I just went, this book's got to crush it.
Wow.
Because if this book crushes it, then I can get him everything he needs. Because the stuff that we did that brought him back was nothing that was covered by insurance. I can pretty much guarantee it, right?
Yeah.
Stem cells and neurofeedback, all sorts of stuff.
Wow. So how did you balance? So, man, it's amazing. Obviously, he's here and he's living and functioning and
He was just with me yesterday, and he was literally. Bryce and I went to walk my little dog, and he comes tearing up the street, running. Now, they told him he'd never walk.
Yeah.
Because he had a crushed heel. Apparently, I remember the orthopedic surgeons going, oh, that's a game changer. He's never going to walk again. I go, if Kobe Bryant were in this bed right now, you wouldn't be saying that. So treat him like Kobe, you know?
Yeah.
So, you know, I keep thinking about that. He's never going to wake up. He's never going to speak. He's never, we call him Grant Never Ever.
Are you one of the people that are you now skeptical of traditional medicine for these reasons?
Grant, the traditional medicine saved my son's life. Here's where I think we do this all wrong. Why is anything alternative? First of all, the idea that diet and exercise is alternative is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That is foundational. I was bringing in food into the hospital and they're all like, I can't believe you're doing this. I go, because I had a big sign up that said no insure. No insure. Like, do not feed him this stuff. I'm bringing him wild salmon. I was making him smoothies. I was doing all sorts of stuff for him. But nothing should be alternative. It should all be on the table and everyone should work together. One thing was really cool at Children's Hospital LA is they were like, game on, let's do it all. Because we put them on 20 grams of fish oil, all sorts of stuff. And they're like, great, let's just put this all into the
They seem pretty progressive versus like that first hospital.
The first hospital, they were like, oh no.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, as soon as I was in my own room, I'm like, this is great. We'll just do this over here. I'm like, Grant, hurry. So he couldn't even talk yet, but I'd be like, suck this down. So we just were giving him loads of liquid fish oil. And when I moved to the second one, he was great with it.
Yeah.
But he would not be here today if it wasn't for what they did. And this one doctor who stayed beyond his shift, like 24 hours straight, monitoring everything and making sure he pulled through. And then Carlos Donaire. So I think we get in trouble when we're like, oh no, no drugs or no, use the best of everything. That's in anything in life, right?
Yeah. What are the things, because you mentioned insure, and that's probably just so obvious in your world, but what are some of the things that you really should take a stance on, right? Because you're saying use the best of everything, but sometimes you get this information of eliminate sugar or gluten-free or this, so how do we make sense of all this?
I think there's some definite things we can say that absolutely should never be. Artificial sweeteners.
Okay.
So and I'm thinking about when he was in the hospital, this is one thing I will say at the Children's Hospital, hopefully they've repaired this at this time. I remember I came in and they had sushi down below, so I'd go get him sushi every day. He was totally thrilled about this. But they were like, well, what is he gonna drink? And I'm like, water.
Yeah.
They wanted to give him Crystal Light. I go, why do we have Crystal Light here? He has a brain injury. We are not going to give him artificial sweeteners. They're neuroexcitatory. This is the worst thing that could possibly happen to him. There is absolutely not one good thing about artificial sweeteners. They are the science experiment that has gone wrong. They are the worst possible thing that you can do. So that's a non-negotiable. Don't do artificial sweeteners.
So that's like Splenda. Is stevia in that category?
No, stevia is a sweet herb.
Okay.
Stevia, monk fruit, erythritol, allulose, xylitol. These are all things that are okay.
Those are okay. Okay.
It's the true artificial, because people say, but it's all natural. I go, all sugar is natural unless it's artificial. It might be processed,
right,
but it's still not artificial. So all those artificial sweeteners, we couldn't figure out. It was interesting. They were looking at these studies going, all right, first one I remember was they looked at people who drank a diet soda a day versus regular soda. And the people who drank a diet soda a day had an inch bigger waist circumference than people who drank the regular soda. And they're like, well, they're probably thinking, oh, they can have cookies because they had the diet soda. But then they went, all of a sudden they're going, wow, people who are drinking artificial sodas and using artificial sweeteners have a 33% higher risk of diabetes. What's really going on? And what they discovered, and this happened, by the way, within a week. I feel sorry for the poor people who volunteered for this study, but within 1 week, artificial sweeteners changed the gut bacteria, the gut microbiome, to be glucose intolerant, which means you're now going to become insulin resistant, which is the precursor to diabetes, because diabetes doesn't happen overnight.
Okay.
It happens over time. So you look at that, you look at the neurotoxicity, you look at the fact that if you eat more sweet, you want more sweet, right?
Yeah.
You look at the calorie dysregulation that happens because you lose the ability to correlate with the degree of sweet with calories. There's no satiety. That's just a bad thing.
So obvious,
no artificial sweeteners.
Got that. Are there any other hard, fast ones, or then is it situational?
Any of the chemical things are just problematic. I mean, here's the biggest threats now to our health. Number one threat to our health is not what you're going to think it's not what you guess. I think the number one threat to our health is lack of connection.
Connection to people?
Yes. I think the number one threat is social isolation, is us not feeling connected, us feeling connected in a fake way, because we have Facebook friends or whatever. I think that's the lack of, that thing that happens when you actually are physically, you touch someone, you hug someone, you get the oxytocin release. You do not get that when someone likes you on Facebook. So that is a huge one that is such a major threat to our health. But the next one is just the toxic load in our environment that we were never built to handle. We have, what is it now, like 80,000 chemicals that are being dumped into our environment, and most of these are new. And what's the problem there is they've never been studied in combination. So they'll look at one thing and they'll overload mice with it. But the problem is, like, take fluoride, chlorine, bromide. So bleached flour, toothpaste, which, by the way, have you ever read on the toothpaste container, because it says, do not swallow this, call poison control. I'm like,
this is going in my mouth.
And chlorine, which is artificial sweeteners, Splenda, swimming pool. Those three together destroy you. They just will take down your thyroid. But that's just an example of all of these ones that you can just accumulate. And if you're not getting them out, and you're probably not, you're storing them in your fat. And if you're storing them in your fat, your body now starts to have hormone problems, insulin resistance. I mean, why do we have like diabetes crazy on the rise? And what's going on with cancer? All of these things to me are a toxic issue.
Got it.
Autoimmune. Huge.
How do we get these toxins out? Because that got my interest.
Yes, this is a hugely important one, because what happens is we store, if we're not getting them out on a regular basis, which is what you want to do, and the first way that you do that is you eat a lot of deep green leafies, because that helps pull the heavy metals out and some of the different chemicals. Some of the chemicals that doesn't work for, so sweating, but infrared saunas are the big one. So infrared saunas are a big one. Exercise, making sure that you are pooping, peeing, and sweating. Like if your pee is not clear, you're not drinking enough water.
Got it.
So, so that's why we need a lot of fiber in our diet. The average person gets 5 to 14 grams. They should have at least 35 grams. I'm like 50 grams or more. You should be having, I call it the poops you should be proud of, right?
Now, can that come from like supplements, or does that always have to come from like
it can come from, I'm a big supplement fan there to make sure that you get what you need. Ideally, you're getting it from things like, avocados and nuts and lentils. But sometimes you'll get someone, let's say they've gone on a ketogenic diet, and one of the problems with the ketogenic diet is quite often they'll be low in fiber. It doesn't have to be, but a lot of times it will be. So you'll see them starting to have issues. So a lot of water, a lot of movement, Epsom salts, good magnesium, liver support. But these are the things that we have to be doing every single day, because every single day we're being confronted, and if you're not getting it out, you're storing it. And those are all the neurological problems. I mean, look at all these weird, crazy diseases that are starting to happen. Right? I mean, they're not happening, there's something going on. And it's the change in environment. It's having all these plastics. Like, you look at it and go, well, just don't heat it up. I go, but it traveled here. So probably heat it up. The worst is never get water bottles, freeze them. I used to have a girlfriend, I was over at her house, and she goes, yeah, I freeze these water bottles and I send them to my kids' lunches. I'm like, you don't like your kids, do you? Like, you just absolutely got phthalates into the water doing that kind of stuff.
Oh man, that is crazy. JJ, I want to go back. I want to put you on the spot here. 1980s. 1980s leg warmers.
Oh yes,
pastel leotards.
Absolutely. Because I was teaching aerobics. In fact,
was it cold that you needed leg warmers?
No, it just looked awesome. Come on. And then I used to rock the thong leotard. I am like mortified too, because I was at UCLA at the time. So I still remember I was at UCLA in the in the mid 80s, and I was teaching at an aerobic studio in Westwood. So I would wear, and I was there like teaching every single day. So I would go to school at UCLA in my leotard thong with a sweatshirt tied around my waist with leg warmers. I'm like going, I walked around like that. I cannot believe that I did that.
You still have pictures of those?
I have a couple pictures from when I taught. When I was teaching at this place in Westwood, it actually had a sister studio in Japan.
Wow.
And so I went there to teach, and I have pictures of me in Japan with my like high pony, my leg warmers.
Yes.
Yep. Yes, I do.
So back then, you were like one of the first, like personal training wasn't a thing?
There were three of us. There were three of us.
It blows my mind.
It was, so what happened was, you know, and I'm pretty sure personal training must have started in LA. So I was at this place called California Shape, and here's the funny thing, there was this big gym called Sports Connection.
Okay.
Sports Connection, the guys from Japan came over and said, hey, we want to build Sports Connection Tokyo. And they go, no, we don't want to do it. Well, they hadn't internationally copyright trademarked their name, so they did it anyway. And then they did this little studio called California Shape, and they would take instructors from there and send them to Japan. So I was managing that place while I was at UCLA, and someone called up and wanted an instructor to come to their house. So I was like, all right, I'll go over there, you know? So that's how I started personal training. But we didn't have any equipment or anything at the time. So I used my own, I would use surgical tubing and my own body. I would be like pushing them and, you know, and using body weight resistant stuff. And then I was at a nail salon and someone goes, well, I want you to come to my house. What do you charge? And I remember at the time, and I was in college and this was the 80s, and I'm like, $35. And I went thinking, you know, and they go, okay. And the next thing I knew, they told all their friends. And so I then raised it to 45.
Right.
And then I raised it to 50. I kept raising it up until I finally got to that point where it was like, all right, now you've like lost a little bit. But I found something interesting is the higher I raised the prices, the more people wanted it. So I just was like, all right, let's keep going. But it was me, Mark Sisson from Mark's Daily Apple, and Body by Jake. And it is where I learned that I had to learn marketing. Because Body by Jake, when I was charging $35 for an hour, was charging $75 for half an hour. And I, at the time, I just graduated from UCLA, and I was now getting my graduate degree in biomechanics. And I'm like, this guy doesn't even have any background.
Yeah.
You know? And he's charging twice as much in half the time. Obviously, I need to learn marketing.
Yeah. You parlayed that into getting a gym, right?
Ugh, I never wanted a gym.
Is that like the pinnacle? Like
I didn't want that gym. I actually never wanted a gym. What happened was I was personal training, and then I had a personal training client who was a Hawaiian Blue Diamond in Nu Skin. And on my 30th birthday, I remember walking down the beach with her, and she goes, well, and at the time I was in, I guess I was in Miami, so I was in graduate school. I'd switched over to Miami to go to University of Miami in sports med. She goes, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I go, I'm going to go get my PhD. She goes, huh, why? And I go, because I want to be more successful. She goes, ah. She goes, well, that doesn't necessarily correlate. I go, it doesn't? Because when I was at UCLA, it was only you went and got your master's and you went and got your PhD. So I was like, I was getting my PhD because that's what I was supposed to do. Never mind that I was making 6 figures in cash in college, right? And everybody else was graduating and getting these like, I kept thinking, that's a terrible thing. I'm not going to do that. So, I mean, here I am making all this cash, and I'm thinking I'm going to go, I don't know what I thought I was going to do. But she goes, I can teach you how to be successful. I go, great. And so I literally, she did that after I'd moved back to LA. She called me, you know, on my 30th birthday. She goes, all right, are you ready? And I go, I'm ready, yeah. And she sent me this little MLM video.
Yes.
And it was when Nu Skin had gone into nutrition, and FloJo was their spokesperson, which was super cool. I actually went to the gym with FloJo. But she sent me this, and I remember the video because the video talked about trading time for money.
Yeah.
And that you could leverage yourself through people or tools or technology. And I'm like, it was like the ding, right? The light bulb went on, and I'm like, and you could never unsee it.
Yep.
And I literally sold my personal training business, and I moved to her house in Fort Lauderdale. She lived on Miracle Mile, or Millionaire's Mile, in between Boca and Fort Lauderdale. I moved in, and I was like, all right, teach me everything. And she started with putting a rubber band on my wrist and saying, okay, here's what you're going to do first. And okay, now I have dropped out of a PhD program.
Yeah.
I have sold my personal training business. I've got nothing, right? I've got this little money trickling in from but that's it. And I'm now wearing rubber bands on my wrist. She goes, every time you think a negative or limiting thought, just snap your wrist. And I'm like, all right, that's great. When are you going to teach me?
Right.
Like, she goes, oh, you're not ready.
This
It
is
was
like
total
Karate
mystery.
Kid.
It totally was. And I'm like, this went on for months of her training me on mindset, training me on, it's all the stuff that when my son was hit, had I not had it so ingrained in me, I never would have pulled it off.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
in fact, when this whole thing went down, I wanted to thank her, but she'd already passed. But I wrote this whole book about Grant and that whole situation. And I wrote all of the lessons that you could use to be able to show up when those things happen. And I couldn't remember where I learned any of them. People were like, how'd you learn that? I go, I don't know. It just is in me. And then one day I went, oh.
She taught me.
I lived it. So I just live it. Like, it is just who I am, right? I mean, I don't have, like, if you every day snap every time you think a limiting belief or say something negative, you just knock it off,
Yeah. Oh my goodness, that's crazy. I want to go to something that I picked up in my research, getting ready for you, and it's, you said in the 20s you were working out like crazy, you were doing all this stuff, and yet you had like 25% body fat.
I remembered, yes.
But now you're, and I'm a little hesitant to say,
what?
now you've passed, how about we say this, now you've passed that age. And,
a little bit.
And you work out less.
Let's just do the numbers. I'm completely cool with all this. I remember I was at USC. I was in their PhD program in exercise physiology, nutrition, and aging. And I remember we had to do some calibrate. So we were doing all this body fat testing, which means, we were doing it on each other, like underwater weighing, all this stuff. And I remember, one of them, I was between 22 and 25% body fat. 25% body fat. I am in my 20s. I am working out like a fiend, hours every day, because that's all I did was personal train and go to school. That's it. That was my whole life. Personal train, go to school. Nothing else. No other responsibilities. And I would work out with clients. So I'd be running and sprinting, and then I'd go lift weights on my own. So every day I did not miss workouts. And lots of cardio. I remember for my 30th birthday, was it my 30th birthday? Maybe 25th, I went and ran the Santa Monica stairs. Then I went and rollerbladed, and then I went and played beach volleyball. I mean, all day long.
Yeah.
It's all day long. 25% body fat. So now, 55, usually about 13 to 15% body fat. I work out, 30 to 45 minutes, 4 to 5 times a week, sometimes 20 minutes. And it's never an issue.
So what's the secret? What's changed? What have you
crazy.
Learned? What?
Just get old. That's just solves all that.
Okay.
Although 55 is the new 25, so there you go. I wish I'd really just started to study physiology and bio. The problem back when I was in school is that there was no talk about hormones and exercise. The first exercise endocrinology text didn't come out until I think 20 years ago. So there never was any talk about, well, what would happen if you go run a marathon?
Yeah.
Turns out people who run a marathon have the same muscle mass as someone who sits on the couch. And so I remember way back when, as I started to look at this, and what happened was, I'm looking at my clients, and they were 45 years old plus. So this is a tough time, men and women. The men tend to be out 55, the women 45. Well, this is when hormones all start to go sideways.
Yeah.
And so your margin for error, is now shot. And what I started to see was what we were being taught in school, which was eat less, exercise more, was failing completely. If anything, they were getting worse. And I thought early on, well, if I make them worse, not better, they're probably not going to keep working with me.
Right.
So I went in and I started to really research what is going on. I started to look at the way Eastern Europeans trained. They don't do long distance cardio. They did short bursts of training. So you start to look at the diet that they used to have, the exercise they used to do, and I thought, gosh, you could run every single day and burn off those calories, but if you weight train, you actually change the way your body handles those calories. Now, I didn't know at the time that it was because of the insulin sensitivity.
Okay.
I just understood now that back then that if I had more muscle on, I had a higher caloric burn going on.
Yeah.
I didn't understand all the hormone stuff. I just was I could spend the same amount of time, or probably a lot less, put some muscle on, and it's going to change the equation dramatically. So that was kind of step one. Then I started to really look at the whole diet, because everything back then was do loads of cardio. In fact, they said that if you couldn't work out at least 30 minutes, don't bother. because you had to get into your fat burning zone. Everything was about the fat burning zone, which is just absolutely stupid. You know when you're in your fat burning zone? When you're sitting on your butt. That's when you should not be in your fat burning zone when you're working out. You should be in a sugar zone because you are working at such high intensity that your body has to use all that glucose. Right? That's what you're burning off all your glycogen stores. You're using up all your glucose so that when you stop exercising, you're refueling into the glycogen stores and burning fat. So you don't want to burn fat when you're exercising. That's just silly. Go for an easy walk, which is not exercise, by the way. So I started to really change that whole thing up of doing resistance training and cardio burst training, and then I started to look at diet, because the other side we were taught was you had to create, this 500 calorie deficit either with exercise or diet. Well, we know if you want to lose weight, exercise is the thing that keeps it off, so you're not a skinny fat person, but diet's what gets it off. And back then it was like, eat really low fat, graze all day long. So it was eating barely any fat. I remember at one time I was down to 10 grams of fat a day, and you were eating little carbs all day long. So what that meant was you were boosting your blood sugar, because every time you were eating these carbs, your blood sugar would go up. Well, if your blood sugar went up, your insulin would go up, and then your blood sugar would drop because the insulin was up, and then you'd eat carbs, and the blood sugar would come back up, the insulin would bop it back down, but the insulin never got a chance to come back down. So now you can't access stored fat for fuel. This is very pro-inflammatory too.
Okay.
So you're always hungry. Even though you just ate, you're like, why am I hungry again?
Yeah.
And I remember always feeling hungry. I remember getting hypoglycemic. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And then to start to really study, okay, wait a minute. If this isn't working, what's going on? What if your body isn't a bank account? What if it's a chemistry lab? What if food's information, exercise is information, and we can change the way your body processes things? And that's when I started messing around with, all right, we shouldn't be snacking. We shouldn't be eating every 2 to 3 hours, which up until even when I was on Dr. Phil for a couple years, I used to say that, and it was a big part of the Phil show, and I had to tell people I couldn't do that because, it just was going to keep them storing fat instead of burning it. But, you don't snack. We don't need to snack.
Okay.
And you should be able to go 4 to 6 hours between meals, which means you're able to burn stored fat for fuel, right? And then you need to look back at how we used to eat, which is there's been no people group in history that was eating this high carb, super low fat diet. And there's definitely never been a vegan group in history. They would have died of B12 deficiencies.
I'm glad you brought that up.
As much as, here's the thing. I love what Dr. Mark Hyman calls it, and I remember when he said, I go, trademark that, Mark, the Pegan diet. We need to eat more plants.
Okay.
We should eat lots of vegetables. But we also, now if it's a religious, spiritual thing, I get it. But, and then I'm just going to supplement you like crazy. But if you're doing it for health reasons, you're misguided. And here's where the vegans make me upset, is they'll go, well, it's the cows. But I go, is it a grass-fed pastured cow, or is it a factory cow? Is it a pastured chicken, or is it a chicken cooped up in cages being shot up?
Okay.
Because they're not the same food at all. I mean, that would be calling one of those silly waters, those like vitamin waters with all the garbage in it, and comparing it to a spring water. These are totally different things. Right? So ideally you're eating a load of plants, loads, rainbow of them, 10 servings a day or more of non-starchy, a little bit of slow, what I call low sugar impact carbs, some good clean protein, and lots of healthy fat. Simple. It's easy. And then you never have to worry about your weight or anything else.
I know you've got a ton of resources for people that kind of want to dive into it, maybe the entrepreneur that has been hustling and working on their business and they're kind of getting this. Where do you recommend someone start to kind of get what just comes so natural to you because you've been studying it? Where does the lay person start with you?
With me, we are actually creating a whole journey on it. I mean, if you go to jjvirgin.com, I think the easiest first place would be first to start with sugar impact.
Okay.
It's interesting. I kind of wrote them, and I've been really mapping out. I believe we're doing the whole diet thing all wrong. You hear all the time the recidivism rate for dieting is something like 93%.
Yeah.
Well, that's because that's not what diets were built for. So here's the thing. We need 2 words. Isn't it Eskimos have 30 words for snowflake or something like that?
Yes, I've heard this.
So we need another word for diet, because to me, there's a therapeutic intervention, and then there's how you eat every day. And they're totally different things. So let's take the diet as the therapeutic intervention. Okay, let's say right now that you are pre-diabetic, you've got some cardiovascular risk factors. So I'd say, hey, you know what? I want you to go on the sugar impact diet. I want you to figure out how sugar is sneaking into your diet, how many processed carbs you're eating, and things that quickly turn into sugar.
Okay.
Because your body will make sugar from the food you eat. You don't want to mainline it. And then you'll start to taper that down, because you never go cold turkey on sugar. It'll just crash.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And then you'll figure out, where it's all sneaking in. We'll retrain your taste buds so you do not have a sweet tooth, possible.
Okay.
And then you'll notice where you feel best. How many carbs should you be having? You'll find your right place. And if you want to do something like intermittent fast or do a ketogenic diet, you've got to become metabolically flexible before you do that, which is what that diet does.
Okay.
Or if you said, you know what, I've got an autoimmune disease, I've got a lot of pain and inflammation, I've got gut problems, I say, well, let's figure out first if you've got any food intolerances. If your gut has become leaky because of stress or age or medications or toxins, and foods are escaping into circulation, your body's launching an immune attack against them, and is creating pain and inflammation and headaches and cravings and autoimmune problems, let's figure out which foods work for you and which foods don't. Those are not long-term diets. Those are discovery processes to help you figure out how you should eat on a regular basis. You do one and then you stabilize, right?
That's an interesting distinction there.
It's a totally different, it's
Yeah.
my next thing. I just haven't figured out the word yet. I keep going, it's a word. It's like the 365 plan. But the reality is, I love that book Gary Keller wrote. Like, to me, this is the best book of all time.
Yeah.
The one thing.
Yep.
I just have to keep reading it and reminding myself, one thing.
Right.
But I think where people go wrong in health is they listen to all this, they go, all right, I need to be connected to other people. I'm going to start sleeping better. I'm going to deal with stress. We got to talk sleep. I've got to exercise. I should be eating better. I need to figure out my food intolerance. I got to lower sugar. I should take supplements.
Yeah.
And then they go, oh my God, I'm tired. I'm not doing anything. Instead of going, all right, step one, I'm going to lower my sugar impact. So I'm going to figure out how many carbs I should be having. I'll get stable there. Then maybe I'll work on my sleep.
Yeah.
Because I'll never be able to really be healthy if my sleep's not out. Okay, now that I got that, all right, I'm going to figure out my food intolerances. And you just go along a path until you get one nailed. And how long that's going to take, who knows? That 21 days is a complete urban legend, as we know.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it takes
yeah.
however long it takes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But that's where having a coach and an accountability partner, especially, I think for any of these types of things, you should hire a coach and pay them more than what you can afford. And if you mess up, you have to pay double. Something like that, right?
True
I get that.
accountability.
Yeah, I have had the best results in life when I hire a coach and pay them more than what I can afford, because then I'm going to take it seriously.
Yeah. You up your game big time.
Oh, hugely. That
Big
was my
time.
biggest transition in business, was when I hired my first coach when I was broke. And I went, well, I guess I really need this. I better do it.
Me too.
You know?
Me too. I want to ask you about fruit. What's the skinny on fruit? Because that's sugar. Is that nature's candy, or is it dangerous?
It depends how you have it. So, somewhere along the line, we got this idea that fruit is free food. It's not free food. It's just not. So, if you are insulin sensitive, if you are able to go 4 to 6 hours between meals, so I'm going to call that as someone who's a fat burner, not a sugar burner. Someone who can go 4 to 6 hours between meals without losing it, without getting that, like the fact that there's a term called hangry should tell us everything. It doesn't give you headaches or any of that low blood sugar. If you're able to lose weight around your waist, like a clear sign you are not metabolically healthy is you lose weight, but you look like a potato on stilts. Like you became a smaller version of the exact same body. So if you cannot lose belly fat, that's why we have to measure our waist, there's a problem. So if you're really healthy, 1 or 2 pieces of fruit a day is fine. But the problem is most of the people you see eating a lot of fruit are like, oh, but this is healthy, so I'll have this for dessert. Fruit, fructose is a very different type of sugar than any other type of sugar. And granted, the worst types of fructose are crystalline fructose or fructose from agave, which is 90% fructose. But fructose can only be metabolized by the liver. So you eat it, and it doesn't raise blood sugar. So we thought this is awesome for diabetics.
Yeah.
No, it's horrible for diabetics because it doesn't raise blood sugar, it actually perturbs your insulin metabolism. It goes straight to the liver, where if it can't be turned into glucose and stored as glycogen, and it can't because there's not that much room there, it becomes fat. Now we have elevated triglycerides, fatty liver, we start becoming insulin resistant, and it elevates your blood pressure. And it's also more aging than any other sugar, 7 times. And along the way, it also makes your gut more permeable, and it's sweeter, so it makes you crave more sweet. So it's a rotten thing. Now, within like some berries, it's fine.
Right.
But if you're now glugging one of those silly green drinks that's actually a fruit juice in disguise, because if you looked at the first 5 ingredients, like that Naked juice. I'm
Yeah.
surprised they haven't gotten mad at me yet, but Evolution, I think it is Naked green juice or whatever it is, shame on them. It is 44 grams of sugar in 16 ounces, more sugar than a soda, right? Because the first 5 ingredients are fruit. So fruit juice is soda.
Yeah.
Apple juice has more fructose than high fructose corn syrup sweetened soda. So it's got more than like a Coke.
Crazy.
Yeah, so juice is soda, dried fruit is candy. All those like syrupy, jammy things, those are syrups.
Yeah.
They're not okay. Fresh or frozen. Frozen's great because it's frozen at the height of season. 1 or 2 pieces a day if you're metabolically healthy. If you are insulin resistant, pre-diabetic, elevated triglycerides, no fruit. I take it totally out till we get that under control, because the more fructose you eat, the better your body is at transporting it straight to the liver and making fat, and that is not something you want to be good at.
That's a big eye opener for me. I thought fruit was safe in moderation, but like everything you just, now I'm
Well, it
scared.
depends. You're fine. Like, you're looking metabolically healthy. 1 to 2 pieces a day,
good. Okay.
right? But I mean, we have kids with fatty liver disease.
Yeah.
This
Kids.
shouldn't be a thing. Like this is a bizarre situation.
Yeah.
Kids.
It blows my
I mean,
mind.
it used to just be alcoholic fatty liver disease. Now it's not that anymore. Now we have non-alcoholic fatty liver disease because of the fructose. And they used to blame it on the high fructose corn syrup, but table sugar has the same composition as high fructose corn syrup does of fructose. And if you're drinking like juices, you're getting it too because you're getting a big hit without the fiber. And no one would sit down and have 4 apples, but they'll have that in apple juice.
Right. That's crazy. JJ, I know we got to wrap up here, but I wanted to get this one in here. TLC's Freaky Eaters. How did this show come to be?
The show that will not go away.
What did you learn? Would you do it again?
It is amazing because I don't know where they're airing this, but every time I go on, especially Instagram Live, they're out there. They're like, "Oh my gosh, where's Dr. Mike Dow? What are you guys doing? Like I've got a problem." I'm like, "Oh my gosh." Here's what I learned about Freaky Eaters. First of all, it was really fun. I had a really fun co-star. I learned be very careful on the contracts you sign.
Okay.
Because they can send you away to some of the places in the country you really don't want to spend a whole lot of time at. Like I got stuck in Reading, Pennsylvania in the winter for weeks. You know, so you end up in places you're like, oh no, right? And you're just stuck there.
Right.
In a residence inn. So that was the first thing, is be super careful about contracts, and then decide if you're going to do. I've done a lot of TV over the years, and the big lesson learned on that show was, if you're going to do a show, consider the demographic of the show. So Freaky Eaters was a show about people who were absolutely hooked on a certain type of food.
Yeah.
And it was to the detriment of their health, to their relationships, everything. So we had French fries were a big one. A lot of people are hooked on French, but this is all they would eat. They would only eat French fries. We had one person who put tartar sauce on everything. We had another person who ate cornstarch. She had pica. We had another person who poured maple syrup on top of everything.
Wow.
So really bizarre.
Yeah.
We didn't get to do the person who put hot sauce on everything and ate hot chilies and stuff. I literally was so excited about that one because I was like, I knew this guy would have some major like rectal problems. I was like, this will be an amazing one. 'Cause we did all sorts of fun tests on people. But the problem was, this was not a show that my demographic was watching.
Yeah.
This was a show that people who wanted to watch people who they thought were freaks. So it was kind of like Hoarders meets, My Strange Addiction.
Interesting.
And so it was not helpful to my career. It was, as opposed to when I was on Dr. Phil for 2 years, it was fantastic. We got all sorts of people commenting and trying to find me. I didn't have any way for them to reach me on my website. I neglected to put that part on. Yes, lesson learned. But with Freaky Eaters, I made sure I wasn't going to make that mistake again, so they could get a hold of me, and it was the craziest of crazy. Right? And I also, when all of a sudden your son's friends, who were then, I think they were maybe like 12, and they thought I was the coolest mom in the neighborhood. Like I was the cool mom because of what I was doing. Like, so all the kids thought it was great. It's like still a weird cult classic. And I literally after 2 seasons was like, please cancel, please cancel, please cancel, please cancel. Please get me out of this.
I'm glad I snuck that one in.
But it was fun. I mean, what a kind of fun thing
That's
do.
cool.
Yeah.
What are you excited about? What are you working on? What's the future look like for you and the empire?
Some of it's just wide open right now. In the consumer side, I'm messing with that.
Okay.
I'm really messing with how to create this more of a roadmap that you go on, a success path, because I really want people, I feel like so many people have failed at their health because the positioning of a diet's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm working on how to reposition that. So working on that. And the only way I ever come out and teach anything is because I start to mess with it and talk with it, and then I start taking people through it, and then I figure it out. So I always figure out in motion. That's my best way to do something. I don't sit at my desk. I never sit at my desk anyway. But so that's what's going on over there. We're starting a whole membership site, and we're actually starting coaches. We're doing a whole redo of the brand.
Okay.
That's going to take me off of it, and we're renaming the entire thing so that we can elevate. I really believe people need to take personal responsibility for their health, not give it over to other people, and then we can help them. So we're bringing in coaches and ambassadors and elevating that to be more foot soldiers to really help support people, because health coaching is really in a massive, it's sort of where personal training was 30 years ago.
Interesting.
So we're working a lot with that, and I teach a lot in the health coaching world. And then in the Mindshare world, we are starting the same thing. I have a community of health entrepreneurs, health experts, all the big, we did $50 million in book advances alone through that group. So it's an amazing group of game changers in the health world, but you have to qualify to be a part of it. And so for every person who's at our event, we have 8 to 10 people who they didn't qualify.
Yeah.
And to me, like, you don't change the world by indoctrinating the indoctrinated. You change the world by helping people who aren't there yet.
Yeah.
And I look at it and go, we need so much help. If you really look at the biggest financial crisis right now, it is the health crisis. The health crisis is bleeding our country and really the world dry. And it could be solved so easily if we would just go to sleep, eat some vegetables, drink some water, and lose those artificial sweeteners. I mean, it's not, it's like we need to start doing it. This is our financial crisis. It is diabetes, it is obesity, it is cancer, and these things can all be massively, massively changed and fixed quickly. So that's what Mindshare is set up to do. But now I want to help all those people who are coming to us they have the books, they want to teach, they want to do all that. So that's my next big mission, is we have put a whole membership together on how to help them. And then I'm doing the same thing with women. So that's the one I'll do next.
Nice.
So Mindshare is probably the next 5 to 10 years. And then I'll move over to, I'm building the women's one, kind of like I built the Mindshare one, small ground up, and then I'll move over to
JJ,
that.
I'm excited. I'm excited for all the things you got going on. If folks want to keep tabs with any of the things that you've talked about, the books, just, see what you're up to in the world, where's the best place for them to do that?
Well, so jjvirgin.com is the consumer, is me on the health side.
Yep.
Mindshare Collaborative is our Mindshare side. And if you are a 7, 8, and 9-figure woman making a difference, that's the Unicorn Club.
Ooh,
yes,
I like that.
Right?
That's got some pop.
So we all came up with that. We were all together one day taking a picture, and we're unicorn. I mean, it's like ridiculous, but it stuck. So it's the Unicorn Club.
I love it. Well, awesome. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in. I really hope that you enjoyed this episode. My big recommendation is you go back, if you're listening to audio, go back. If you're watching the video, go back, listen to it again, because I've had a transformation myself when it comes to health. I was late to the conversation, and I'm so glad that I'm in this conversation and I continually learn, because without our health, we've got nothing, and we can just be so much more productive and do more things and be there for our family. So thanks for joining us. Let us know on social what you thought about the show and what your big takeaway is. That's it for now. Can't wait to have you back on the next show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Get Well Fit. Did you have an aha moment or two during the episode? I want to know. Remember, life doesn't pay you for what you know, it pays you for what you do, for the actions you take and the moves you make. So take a second right now and go to getwellfit.com. You'll find a printable recap of this episode, links to things we mentioned in the show, and some exercises that'll help you start taking action on the things you've learned. You can also get in touch with me, Dustin Matthews. That's getwellfit.com. Go there now, and I can't wait to talk with you again on the next episode.